Γεια σας μαθητές, salvete discipuli, and welcome to yet another episode of Medical Greek and Latin. This is lesson 10, and if you've watched the last two recently, you'll know that, well, the last one in particular was extremely long. The original lesson was huge, and I've broken it up into three parts. This is the third part. So we've already talked about the recent prefixes and suffixes, and we had left out vocabulary. And in this video, we're just going to look at the root words and some words that can be built with things that we've learned in recent lessons. So let's get started. All right, and this probably looks familiar by now. I am going to present things a little differently. We have the root word akron, and there's what it looks like in Greek. And its combining form, which is what's really important to you, I think, is the ACR. Okay, and this means highest point or extremity. So you get Acropolis from this, the highest point in the city. Now, somebody out there might be wondering why this is spelled with a lowercase a. If it's got a capital A, it's the Acropolis in the city of Athens. But the Acropolis can be found in just about every old Greek city. There were about 1,000 Greek city-states. So with a lowercase a, it's just an Acropolis, highest point of a city. Acrophobia, of course, is a fear of heights, an irrational fear of heights. Acromegaly, acrobat, which we've talked about in a recent episode. Do not confuse this with words like acrimony or acrid, which are connected to bitterness. So even though acrimony and acrophobia, the acra sounds the same, it's spelled differently. The acro is Greek, the acri is Latin. All right, let's move on. Next we have karkinos, or karkinos, if you want it in Greek. And this is where we get karkin or karsin as we bring it into English. And this is what's called a doublet. It's a word that has broken off into two other words. This is the root for cancer. It also means crab, by the way. And to the ancients who opened up the body and saw these strange these tissue conditions, thought that they looked at something that resembled a crab. So cancer really just means crab. And this is the Latin conquer, for those of you who study Latin. And believe it or not, through a very roundabout way, we wind up with the word canker sore. It does share a common root with conquer and karkinos. Next, we have kili. Okay, kili, there's the Greek. And we'll get CEL or CELE, seal. And this pertains to a hernia or a tumor. So when it's a hernia, you might see something like gastrocele, nephrocele, which you probably can figure out is connected to a kidney, because we've had nephro many times already. It's also used when talking about liquids, things that are full of liquid, like a galactocele, and we'll actually see those later in this video. Moving right along, we have choli. Okay, this is another important Greek word. Most of these Greek words are exactly as you see them today. So in modern Greek and in ancient Greek, there are occasional changes in spelling, but not many. And this is where you get chol, with or without the E, and it means bile or gall. Okay, so we get words like cholesterol from this, and sterol will probably come up much later. The all, if I haven't mentioned it already, and I don't think I have, has a connection to alcohol. I believe that's coming up in a later lesson. Okay, next we have colon, and I've highlighted the ni here in akron and in colon. You can see that ni is a light blue color. The reason for that is this is called a movable knee, or those of you who study ancient Greek have probably been taught to call it rather a movable nu. And that's just because it disappears. We have musion in modern Greek and musio. All right, and the combining forms for this are kol and kolon, sometimes koli, and this is just the colon, not the punctuation mark, of course. And this is where we get the coli in E. coli. The E is actually the German scientist, I believe, who discovered it. Okay, next we have Kianos, and there's what it looks like in its combining form. And it's a blue or cyan, which is more or less the color that you see here. Of course, cyan is one of the primary colors in painting, right? Cyan, magenta, yellow, and in photography, there are many, many words for blue in Greek. Ironically, the most common word for blue, ble, is not Greek. Okay, next we have kistis, and notice the Greek here, kisti or kistis, that iota sigma that you see all the way to the right, that tells you that it was a third declension word at one point. We've already talked about the third declension in Greek. And this is where we get cysti and cystis. And it pertains to the bladder or cysts. And we'll talk more about that in a little bit. And you'll see cholecyst, dacryocyst. This is a term in ophthalmology. Dacry, those of you who've had ancient or modern Greek know that a dacry is a tear. Okay, a phacocyst, phakos, if you don't know, is a lens. So a phacocyst and a dacryocyst pertain to the eye, and a cystoid, well, you already know what an oid is. So this one should be easy to figure out if you've been following these lessons closely. Enteron, and there's the Greek ederon, and again with that movable knee at the end. And it has nothing to do with entry. This actually pertains to the intestine. Next, we have ergon, and there's the Greek ergon, a very important word. Okay, and its combining form is erg, and action or work, and we'll take a closer look at this in a few moments also. But RG is the really important part of this. It appears in a lot of words, and it's always connected to working and function. A chirurgian that's an old word for surgeon, believe it or not. Chir is, of course, the hieri, the hir, the hand. A liturgy is a service, a function. Ergonomic, something that works efficiently. Synergism, I know Disney loves to use this term, synergy, working together. And you get this thing here, an erg. Okay, rowers use this. And even my name, George, uses this RG root. We have geo, which means earth. Okay, and then the RG, which means one who works. So one who works the earth is a farmer. And there you go. Okay, let's move on. All right, this one I know we've seen before. Gastir, gaster. Okay, and there's its combining form that means stomach. Of course, in modern Greek, some of you may know the word kilia, which is closer to the belly. We also have the word stomachi. And another one that we've seen before, Emma. If you've had ancient Greek, you've learned to pronounce that rough breathing, hema or haima. And lots of combining forms with this one. This is where we get blood and hematologist. Okay, lipos, lip is fat. Macros, MACR is its combining form. Remember the Greek kappa. was a K for a while in other languages, but as they developed New Latin, the Ks mostly, not entirely, mostly became Cs, and we get large or long. And sometimes dictionaries like to say that this is abnormally large or long. Related to that is megas or megalou. This one is irregular for those of you who've had Greek. Megas or mega, and I'm sure you know many words that have this, also abnormally large or long. Okay, and you'll see words like megabyte. Occurs in technology and in megalomaniac, and it's all throughout our vocabulary. Next, we have mikros or mikros, if you want to hear it in Greek. Okay, and there's the micro or the micro, and it just means small. Okay, this one here, odini, my guess is many people probably don't know it. Odini has the combining form Odin, and it means pain. Next we have onkos, ogos, and it is important to note here for those of you who are learning Greek, the English shows us that nasal sound, that N, onkos. However, there is no ni in the Greek. It's a g sound, ogos, but you can't form a g sound without first making an N sound. So the N sound is there, but the letter is not used. And we get ONC, and this is obviously related to tumor in words like oncology. Next we have pakis, and I know this word has come up before. Pachis, which just means thick. If somebody says, well, we have the word pachyderm, another word for an elephant, has a very thick skin. Just a few more root words to go over with you here. With macro, I forgot to mention this earlier, we get macroeconomics, macropedia. For those of you who know how to use a real encyclopedia, you will know what a macropedia is. And if anybody grew up watching Robotech, which I did, its Japanese name was Macross because all the action took place, or most of the action took place, on a giant ship, on a giant fortress. All right, just a few more here. We have pion or pion, or if you're an ancient Greek student, puon. And the combining form is py, and this means pus. Next, we have spasmos, which might be an easy one to guess. Spasmos, spasm, okay, spasm or a muscular contraction. And splena, splen, which gives us spleen. So those are all of your root words. If you don't have them, I know I've been going kind of quickly because there's a lot of ground to cover here. Make sure you add these to your notes and memorize the combining forms. With spasm, by the way, we get words like spasmodic and blepharospasm. If you watched the last couple of episodes, you know what a blepharon is. I don't want to give it away because I've already introduced the word. And if anybody grew up playing video games in the 90s, a company called Working Designs had the Spaz label, and they made games like this one, Thunder Force 5. It was a classic. Now let's look, this is my favorite part. Let's look at some long medical terms and break them up. We'll parse them and see what we can learn from them. First, we have anastomosis. And we know that ana means up or back or again or re. Stome is mouth and osis is an abnormal condition. So an anastomosis is a formation of a passage between distinct spaces or organs. In other words, things that would not normally be joined, things that would normally be separate, are connected via some kind of passageway. There's what it looks like in Greek, another third declension word that has become a second. And let's not forget how we pluralize these words. Anastomosis is one, anastomoses is two, like crisis, crises, analysis, analyses. And without getting into too much medicine here, basically this is sometimes done to help connect two different parts of the body if we need to avoid some damaged tract or something like that. An arteriovenous anastomosis, it looks like a lot, but we've had arterio before. This is a passageway opened between an artery and a vein. Staying with this idea, we have the strangely named enteroenterostomy. Entero, we know, is intestine, and intestine again. Stomy indicates a surgical procedure. Tomy sometimes indicates a cutting. A tome is a cut part of a book, like a volume. So intestine surgical procedure. An enteroenterostomy is the creation of an opening between non-continuous parts of the intestine. So imagine somewhere in the middle of the intestine. I don't want to show you a picture because it's pretty gruesome looking. But let's say we've got the intestine here, and imagine this part is damaged. Well, an enteroenterostomy will allow this good part to be connected to this other good part and bypassing the red. And I guess they would remove the red later, I don't know. So we have enteroenterostomy, and if we have more than one of these, which can happen, stomy becomes stomata, enteroenterostomata. Okay, let's move on. But still staying with stomy, we have colostomy. And we've already talked about colon. Okay, colo is just one of the combining forms of colon, and stomy indicates a surgical procedure. So we get a colostomy, the creation of an opening between the colon and the surface of the abdomen, essentially an opening in the large intestine. So this is a pretty cool one, but they create an alternative opening for the large intestine um, to the surface of the body. There are reasons for it, but I don't think anybody would want to get one of these. Next, we have arthroncus. Kind of a difficult word to say. Arthron is a joint. It's where you get arthropod. And believe it or not, the word article, okay, like an or the are the three grammatic articles in English. Oncus is a tumor. So arthroncus is the tumor that can be found in a joint. Hematonchus is, you can probably figure out if you remember what hemot is. Okay. Mastonchus, mast has to do with the breast. Nephronchus, we've seen nephro a lot already. And obviously the word oncology. So in yellow, we can see that ONC that indicates tumor. Next, we have gastrocele. So gastro, as we've already established, is the stomach, and seal has to do with hernia or something that is full of liquid. So a hernia of the stomach is a gastrocele. Okay, we have cystocele, splenocoele. Obviously, you can imagine that that's connected to the spleen in some way. A urocele, which has to do with the accumulation of urine. Hydrocele, hydro obviously being water. Galactocele, this is the accumulation of milk. I would imagine this is in women who are lactating. And coelology. Okay, so the study of all of these seals. And interestingly, we also get the word cheloid from this. Now, a cheloid, this is interesting because the C did not uh, overtake the K, the kappa. It didn't supplant it. The K somehow survived. Um, and this is kind of like it's like a scar-like growth of tissue on the skin. Okay. I don't know if this has ever been spelled celoid, Celoid. I've only ever seen Keloid. Next we have cystolithiasis. This just doesn't sound fun to have. And we know that cysto has to do with cysts. It's also affiliated with the bladder. Lith we know is a stone, and an iasis is a condition. So, can anybody out there pause this and figure out what cystolithiasis is? Maybe I gave it away too soon. It's a bladder stone. And we get words like cystalgia. Remember, algia is pain. Our next word is hepatoma. Hepat, you may recall, is the combining form of liver. And oma, of course, is abnormal, diseased condition. And we get hepatoma. Okay, hepatoma is just a cancer of the liver. Now, what's interesting about these omas is that the root that's connected to the oma indicates the location of the condition or its nature. So hematoma tells us that its origin or its nature is connected to the blood. Uh, Trachoma is a form of conjunctivitis. Nephroma is obviously a kidney tumor. Hematoma, by the way, is a swelling of blood vessels, of dilated blood vessels. Um, Cholangioma is a tumor of the passages, the bile ducts, where the chole is, where the bile is. Sarcoma is a tumor starting in any connective tissue. So if you get myosarcoma, the MY, you can remember that Y, if you've been watching my other videos, Y and the Greek epsilon, the U, are the same, and that my is muscle. So myosarcoma is a tumor in muscle tissue. Osteosarcoma is a tumor in the bones. Angiosarcoma is in the muscular tissue of a blood vessel. Hemangiosarcoma, if I'm not mistaken, it's exactly the same as the one above it. I just think these are synonyms. Neurosarcoma is a sarcoma containing neurons. You can see there are lots of these. There is one that is kind of tricky, glaucoma, which we know is a destructive eye condition. The glauk, though, if you really go back into Greek, deep into Greek, it means shining. Um, it also at one point came to mean gray, like a grayish blue. So I think, if I'm not mistaken, this could come from glaucomatis, shining-eyed or bright-eyed, and we see glaucomatis in modern Greek. We have the word mati, which is one of the words for eye, shining-eyed or gray-eyed. It's an epithet. It's an adjective usually used to describe Athena. But this could also be the oma that we're learning here. We also get melanoma, which is a malignant tumor containing melanin, right? The stuff that we talked about, I believe, in the last lesson. And if you have many of these, you might get melanomatosis. Okay, so that's another word that can be built from this one here. And oh, geez, I did it again. This is way longer than I expected. So I'll just end with my typical telos and wish you all happy studies.